Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the replay if you're watching the replay. And as people funnel in here, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We've already got some folks jumping on here. So I am in the process. I'm just getting this up and running on Facebook. As if you've seen any of our stuff before, you're probably aware that this will be live on the Facebook, on Mission Suite's Facebook page as well. And so this is great, man. We've already got some people. So this is apparently a topic that people are urgently waiting to learn about. You know, they're eager, which is awesome. I love it. So we've got about half our registration list already joining us, which is awesome. And so we'll give it a minute here. But yeah, just as I mentioned, this is live on Facebook. So if you have anybody who's just itching to get on and can't find a Zoom link and is texting you frantically saying, how do I get onto this amazing session that's about to happen, you can send them to the Mission Suite Facebook page, and we will be we'll be live there too. And with that, I will say, awesome. I'm excited for this presentation. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's community table discussion. We are talking about brand archetyping and how you can tell better stories to grow your business, specifically understanding brand archetypes and how you can use them to actually grow. My name is Ian Campbell, and I am the CEO of Mission Suite. And joining me as always today is Dean Isaacs. Dean is the founder of Vantage Group. It's a business growth strategy firm. He works with B2B companies, helping them grow predictable, profitable revenue and scale their organizations. And in 2018, Dean launched the Growth Collaborative, a group consulting and mastermind program that helps B2B consultants and experts break through their revenue ceiling and generate high ticket clients month after month. And I actually know some folks who are in Dean's Growth Collaborative, and I have been consistently hearing really good things about them. So, you know, if that's something that interests you, you should definitely reach out to Dean. It sounds like it's a pretty engaging group. Also joining us today is Stephanie Gunther. Stephanie is the CEO and creative director at Wax Creek. Helping companies build and manage their unique world-class brand is her passion and top priority. Stephanie has been in the marketing world for nearly 15 years, focusing on brand strategy, archetyping, creation, and management to help organizations utilize their strengths and passion for fostering growth. Stephanie is an expert at building brand relevancy, engagement, and trust. She's also a creative thinker who helps organizations better understand and address the barriers to sustained growth. And one of Stephanie's biggest passions and one of her secret weapons is brand archetyping. And she's going to be sharing some of that and unlocking some of the secrets for us today. She works with clients that want to stand out in a big way. They're the movers and shakers, the change makers and impact creators of the world. They are ready to undergo remarkable transformation to get to the next level. Clients who work with Stephanie and Wax Creek receive a uniquely crafted brand archetype that is, and I had to get this in here, that is one of 11,703,240. And I had to get that in there because apparently that's a real number.
It is.
And she said that it's, and we were talking before, and she said that it's updated. So, you know, that's like real as of today, I'm guessing, right? I mean,
yeah.
So that's awesome. Before we jump in, I want to make sure to address a couple of housekeeping items. Obviously, we're going to be taking questions throughout the session today. If you have questions along the way, do me a favor and hit that Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Do not put them in the chat for us. Keep them in that Q&A box so that we can kind of keep everything contained. That'll help us out as we kind of manage the chaos that is a live panel discussion virtually. And of course, we'll be opening up to Q&A at the end as well. So if you have questions, but don't want to interrupt the brilliance that's coming out of Dean and Stephanie's mouths, then you know you can save them to that too. But yeah. So with that, again, I am really looking forward to today. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And it's always nice to, as a self-proclaimed marketing geek, it's always nice to have conversations with others that share that kind of realm. So with that, Stephanie, why don't we do me a favor? We obviously read your bio, but you as one of the things that I appreciated about you from the first time that we met is that you very clearly like telling stories. So take a couple minutes and share your story as to how you got to where you are and kind of where you came from.
Perfect. Thank you. And thanks for having me here today. Really, I'll give you the only story you really need to know about how I got here. And it starts out as, about 6 years ago, I decided I didn't want to travel anymore. I have a son at home. And so I was like, I'm going to start a business and it's going to be great and so easy and amazing. And it wasn't, as we all know how that goes. But what really started to happen in that was I had all this knowledge and all this experience from working in small businesses and helping them grow and develop their brand and manage it. But as I took it out into the world, I realized really through a very painful process that you do need to know your brand, even as a very small business, even as a solopreneur. You have to know who you are and what you're selling and who you're doing it for. Because in the beginning, I was just a yes woman. I was like, can you do this for me? Yeah, sure. Can you do this? Yeah, of course. And so you're all over the place. And really my favorite, it's not my favorite. It's one of the worst stories ever, but I'll make it real short here. But I ended up getting a lead from Thumbtack, highly not recommended ever for anybody. And went and met this potential client, and she just needed a logo file converted, essentially. It was just not a big project. And I thought, I didn't charge her very much at all. And long story short, it ended up being more complicated than that. And out of the kindness of my heart, I just wanted to help her. And so I completed the work, and she somehow didn't receive the file. And I was also sending this and working on this when I was on a family camping trip. And so I was already, because we do that, especially at that stage. And so as I was driving into my next place where I was landing, a small cabin in the mountains, it was lovely. I get this insane email that's pages long, scathing about how I would take her money. And we're talking less than $100, mind you. So I could take her money and just run, and how that I had no integrity. And she had to have spent an hour typing up the email itself. And turns out she just didn't get the files because I had sent them through a file sharing system. And it was at that point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And entered my journey with branding, because it was really the necessity of needing my own brand and understanding who I was and who I wanted to work with and what kind of business I wanted to build that got me to where I am now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I think you said you made one of the points that you made there is that understanding your own brand actually helps you figure out who you want to work with as well, and who you want your clients to be too, right? Yeah. And so I think that's kind of a big takeaway there, is that if we actually know who we are, we can really identify and understand who's worth keeping around us.
Yeah, for sure. And really having a brand that's separate from your own identity, especially as a small business owner or a solopreneur, is really important, because especially in that stage of business, we spend a lot of time second guessing who we are and who we are as business owners. And so it sometimes can feel really bad to show up as the brand. Like, I don't want to, is this me or is this the brand? I don't know whose voice this is. And so having a clear identity that is not just me as Stephanie, a human being, is really useful to know how to separate that and navigate that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we've mentioned brand a couple of times, and I think the term brand is used a lot in a lot of contexts that are incorrect. So when somebody talks about a new logo, they talk about a new brand. Well,
right.
Maybe not, right? I would say probably not. So from your perspective, what are the components of a brand?
Oh, I love this question. So you guys are going to geek out with me a little bit in the solar system here. I really believe wholeheartedly that your brand lives at the center of your entire business universe, right? So at the very core center of it is your brand, and everything else is rotating, orbiting around it. And so it really touches more than marketing or more than just your messaging, definitely more than your logo. It's really who you are. What is your reputation? What do you stand for? And it impacts every single thing in your business, from your culture to the sales messaging that you're using to the client journey and the experience that you provide for your customers when you work with them. It really is all encompassing of all things, in my opinion. And that's why you need more than just a logo. You need an actual strategy to shine light on what you're doing and how you're operating in your business.
Yeah, it's really your whole identity, right? So if somebody
Yeah.
said, tell me about Stephanie, they're going to reflect your identity, you as the owner and you as a business. And if they're not reflecting back those key components, then you haven't either developed or communicated your brand in a way that sticks.
Yes. Yeah, I think that it's important to have those foundational pieces so that you are always saying the same thing. And again, this gets back to us as business owners figuring out what we stand for, and we need to be sharing it, right? Like we see a lot of big corporations do that, and they all have their causes or their stances or their lack thereof. But as even the most small business owner, you need to have those things so you need to communicate that, because that's what builds trust ultimately with your clients.
Yeah, it needs to be intentional, right? And a lot of times this sort of brand or this reputation is created through unintentionality, right? It's just how you operate. It's what you do. It's how people get to know you, right or wrong, good or bad, it can happen. And so being intentional about building that brand is really, I think, early stage companies, people that start out on their own, they don't even think about that. They're thinking about the logo. They're thinking about their tagline, thinking about their domain name.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not thinking about this sort of the bigger concept of brand and how they want to be recognized and how they set themselves apart in the marketplace, right? Because everybody has competition and everybody says the same kind of stuff about what they do. You don't have identifiable brand.
Because you're going to be branded one way or another, right? I mean,
definitely.
No matter what it is, I mean, it's either going to be, like a hot poker on the rear end, or it's going to be something that you kind of lay out in front of people. So, kind of being very clear about that is obviously a big deal.
Yeah, I like to use the exercise of pretending that your brand is going to a party. And inside of the party, you put all of your past clients are there, your prospective future clients are there, probably some of your friends and family and people from high school that watch you on Facebook that you care a lot still about for some reason. Everybody, right? Your entire sphere is at this party, and your brand is there too. And what are people going to say about it? And you need to see it as its own person or see it in its own identity. How are people going to talk about it when they're talking amongst themselves? Like, how was your experience working with so-and-so, and what was it like, and how did it go? And, gee, it used to be this way, but now it's not. I mean, they're going to talk about you just like you talk about a person at a party. And so that you need to be very mindful of that. And you're absolutely correct, Ian, that if you don't manage it yourself, it will be managed for you. And that is not a good position to be in.
Right. Mm-hmm. So tell us what. So the concept of a brand archetype is something that, I've heard of. And I mean, I've been in the marketing world for about 20 something years now, 21, 22 years now. And, and so I've worked with a bunch of agencies, and typically when I hear the term brand archetype, it is something that the creative director and is trying to relate to the copywriter, and it's never spoken of outside of that kind of relationship. So it's very, very, I mean, it always seems to be very marketing specific, and if you're not in this realm, then you don't need to know about it. Just trust us. We have you covered here.
Right.
Obviously we're trying to break that today. So to kind of give us the basics of what we're talking about when we talk about brand archetype, or when we hear about brand archetype.
Sure. So brand archetypes really at their most simple form are just a character in a story that is trying to say something to other characters. I mean, that really is it. And the reason this is so effective is that it's not this real high level marketing jargony, like high level stuff that people can't understand. I mean, I'm literally talking about a fairy godmother, or Hansel and Gretel, or the hero that comes in to save the day, or the middle child who always gets overlooked for things around the house. I mean, whatever it is, right? These are the stories we know from a very young age. And so we all understand this. So this goes across generations, it goes across cultures. Everybody understands these basic characters in a story. And so when we start looking at archetyping, it is very useful for other, marketing to marketing, when we're developing messaging and marketing campaigns and graphics and visuals, things like that. But it's really the most important for the business owner or the management team or the culture within the business to understand, because it's so relatable. I mean, your entire staff of 500 people can can understand an archetype or the story that we're trying to tell and how we show up in the world. And so really at its most basic form, that is all it is. As far as the system itself goes, archetypes were developed by Carl Jung in the early 1900s, who was a famous psychologist. And really, he was using them to archetype humans and different types of human beings. And then over the last couple hundred years, it's been developed into brands. And so, you're looking at a core set of 12 archetypes that are widely accepted around the world and across time. And I already mentioned a little bit, but we're looking at very basic characters such as the ruler or the caregiver or the magician or the outlaw. And we all start to understand who those characters are. And we can even start to understand brands that fit into some of those different archetypes. Like one of the most obvious might be Nike being a hero brand, or Harley Davidson being an outlaw. We really understand that very innately, and that's that intuitive piece that I'm talking about, that we just get it.
Yeah.
So is this how I ended up getting branded with Peter Pan syndrome over the course of my younger years, like my mid 20s and 30s?
Maybe. I mean, because we know exactly what you're saying with that, right? Like we just built
Exactly.
a whole picture in my head of like what's happened so far in your life.
Did not play well in early relationships. I can tell you. I can tell you that.
Right.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
You mentioned the word a couple of times, sorry, in there.
Okay.
Is this concept of relatability, right? And I think that's, while you don't show up with, a picture of a magician, if you feel like you're the magician archetype for your brand, the way you message, the way you communicate, and who you target will be affected by how you perceive your own brand archetype. Because we all know, right? Like attracts like. We attract people that feel familiar, or they're attracted to us because we feel familiar. So I think that it's not just an internal thing, it's an external thing too. It's like how you may be personally, as a individual business owner, this type of person, that's fine. But you may not want your brand archetype to reflect that, because that's not who you want to attract as your target audience. So it's a magnetism thing I think people forget about. Like if you're not a Jeep owner, you don't get it, right? You just don't get it, right?
Yeah.
If you're a Mercedes owner, that's your thing, that's cool. We're attracting this certain type of buyer persona, which allows us to start with that differentiation and messaging and so on. So maybe speak to that. Like how do you see that work in the marketplace?
Yeah, it is very fascinating. I will tell you, we've started just in my agency, we've started data tracking the different archetypes that our clients come in as. And there's always an element of strategy involved in this. We don't just take it at face value. We're like, oh, well, you took a test and you're a hero and that's it. But, we do assess our clients as they come in the door. And we've actually started to recognize with some shifts that we've made that I hope I don't like curse anything here, but every single client we've had in the last 6 months or so has come in ranking for magician, which is what our brand is predominantly. And so even when we're like, there's no way there's magician in this brand because it doesn't really make sense, there is. And it is fascinating to me that's happening, and we're seeing that magnetism. And so it means that our messaging is working. At least for those people, it's really working. And so when we're looking at things like magnetism, we're looking at who you are. And then on the other side of it, we might be looking, maybe your clients are way over on the other side. Maybe you really stand for belonging, right? Like inclusion and friendship and belonging at its core. But maybe you have clients that are yearning for that because maybe they don't have it. And so we always have to assess, are they the same as us? Do they just like us because we're like-minded, or do they like us because they want to be more like us? And so that's a part of the strategy, is understanding that.
Yeah, that attraction piece is interesting.
Yeah, because I imagine that to Dean's point, like attracts like, and you're talking about like your brand is the archetype is magician, and you're attracting a lot of those as well. But what about, are there instances? I would imagine that there would have to be where one archetype is kind of seeking something in another brand. Like I'm thinking like the middle child, the Jan Brady, Marsha looking for a fairy godmother kind of a thing, right? Yeah. Is that something that kind of happens too? And is that something that we can kind of leverage in our messaging and things like that? Or is that like one of those things where you probably not the right way to go about it, because it's going to be more of a hassle in the long run as you start to kind of work with these people?
I think that the strongest marketing and messaging is usually pulling people from a little bit of a different side because they want so desperately to be more like that. And they're really seeking it. And so at some point they might end up being very like-minded, but usually if you can catch them when they're really seeking that, it can work really well. A great example of this is looking at the brand of Starbucks. So Starbucks is a little harder to identify on the nose, like some of the bigger brands. And I won't put you through any quizzes or anything, but they are an explorer archetype. And you can see this in their logo, is like the sea creature woman. And Starbuck is also a character from a Moby Dick story, First Mate. And then when you walk into the store, if you look around, and next time do, you'll notice that all of the wood and the finishings and furnishings are like done like a ship. It looks kind of like a boat. All of the wood is finished that way. And then the most brilliant thing that they did that catapulted them to massive success early on was they let people be an explorer. And it's in the most simple form, right? In ordering coffee, but they let people come in and be their individual selves and order a triple shot caramel macchiato with a sprinkle of cinnamon and oat milk. And you know what I mean? With all of these things, and nobody batted an eye. They were like, okay, thanks, Stephanie. Have a great day. And you're like, that was ridiculous, but nobody even cared. And in fact, they embraced my individuality. And that's what made them so successful, is that pull towards that explorer type and a desire to be able to express ourselves more.
So I was reading in your bio, and I don't think I mentioned this when I was reading the bio, but I think I saw it earlier that there are 12 archetypes and 12 primary archetypes. Can you? Yes. So, and I don't know if this would get too deep in the weeds, but you've mentioned a couple archetypes over here, and so I'm wondering if you can kind of give like whether it's a rundown or just kind of talk a little bit, speak to a little bit of what these things are. So that to kind of, I don't know, I guess dumb it down for me, if nothing else.
Yeah, sure. So really we have 4 different quadrants in the archetype wheel, and I'll just go through each quadrant because they really do they are very relatable to each other. In the top, one of the top corners, you have an archetype group that prefers stability and control. They're more on the freedom and independence side. So they sometimes can be, either they like to be alone, or they just tend to be alone, or they're brands that are promoting individuality and freedom. And so those are going to be your innocent, sage, and explorer archetypes. So with innocent, we have this sense of wonder, right? Like the world should be a more simple place. We should get back to old values. It can be a better world. And then next to innocent, we have sage, which is all about knowledge. Google is sage. And so it's all about providing access to knowledge to people. And then with them is another seeking archetype, the explorer, like I mentioned with Starbucks. The explorer is similar to sage, but they prefer to gain their knowledge through experiences and trying new things. And so you see those brands, especially in like outdoor gear, and a lot of vehicles and car brands are explorer. And also a lot of youth brands, because most youth are definitely pushing towards that individuality piece. And so like almost all youth brands between ages 15 and 25 tend to be explorer because of that. And then in the next quadrant is the mastery and risk tolerant, the most bold of all of the archetypes. So you have the outlaw, which is the Harley Davidsons of the world, the people that push the status quo and don't care about rules at all, they're the best. I love those brands. The magician, which is all about transformation and this, universal power that we can harness to create things and discover new things. And then the hero, which is there to save the day. We all understand the hero really well. And you see heroes a lot in like any kind of blue collar fields or industries. A lot of lawyers are heroes. You see that it's a pretty common archetype to possess. Moving to the next group, you have the people that care a lot about belonging and inclusion. So we have the everyman, which I call the best friend brand. Or it could be like the next door neighbor brand, the good citizen brand. We have the entertainer, which are about like the glass half full kind of people. And then the lover, which is one of my favorites, because we think of lover brands in business and we're like, oh, that feels really weird. But the lover is about the senses and intimacy. And so we can have intimacy in our brands or with our clients in a way that is proper and appropriate. And they can be really fun. And then in the final quadrant is really the structure archetypes, I'll call them. And so we have the caregiver, which is the servant, the ruler, which don't think about bad rulers. A lot of people are like, oh, rulers are bad. Think of like the benevolent queen, ruler is a better depiction. And then we also have the creator. And while the creator might seem wild and abstract, really the creator builds and innovates new things to create new structures. So they're also building structure.
So you lay those out, and I mean, and I might just be thinking a lot of myself here, but I feel like I fall into a lot of those different categories that you just described, right? And so I'm sure that there are some that are significantly more so than others. But how many of these archetypes do people tend to fall into?
We tend to look at the top 4.
Okay.
We use a system of, I gave you the top 12. Within these 12 families, we use 5 sub archetypes within each of the 12 families, which gives us a total set of 60 different archetypes that we're looking at. And we typically look at the top 4 for any given client, because we don't want to overwhelm anybody and we don't want our messaging to become confusing. But we also still need to build in dimension and dynamics into it. And just like human beings, like no one person is just like, well, she's just very caring and that's it. It's like we have dimension as humans. And so we build that into brands as well, so that we can really help support the strategy and the growth initiatives and also speak to their clients in the right way. We're using all of those things very strategically.
Very cool. So, Dean, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Stephanie, you mentioned sort of message and voice in there. And I think a lot of businesses struggle to find their voice, right? To sound different, to stand out from the crowd, find this whole differentiation thing. And by looking at the archetypes, it allows you almost to create a voice that mimics that character or a blend. And then all of a sudden you've got this voice. If you say magician, you can start to think about the language or the direction you want to take your messaging. And then it seems like the next step is, now you've kind of got your voice, what the heck are you going to say? And being able to take a stand, right? Have your brand stand for something, right? What is the thing that, like the dogma in the industry that you serve, that you know is wrong, you're trying to rectify? And you can message to that in a way that resonates with their audience. So you may be the magician, as an example. You may not be marketing to magicians, but people know that what you're trying to solve for is the thing they need. That's where the attraction comes in. And as the magician, you can solve the problem. So I don't see enough brands, especially in small business, just taking a stand for the thing they do, right? And calling out what we know doesn't work anymore. What worked in business 5 years ago, probably not working as well now, right? We've had a few things go on in the last couple of years. So how do you see like finding your voice and taking a stand and having an opinion in your messaging? How does that fit into this?
It really is we look a lot, core values comes into this in a pretty huge way, because core values should depict really like how you feel, even if it's, as the person and the business owner, because a lot of times core values are hard to separate between the two, because especially in smaller businesses, you have a person that has created the business and is running it, and their values in the business are probably very, very similar to their values in their personal life as well. But that's always a great place to start is its values. I always think like people are just like, oh yeah, I'll write them, I'll paint them on my wall and I'll hand them out to my employees. But they're really important because they should be actually what you stand for and what you believe to be true about the world and the wrongs you're trying to right. And so if you can put some power into your values, it becomes really easy to take a fairy godmother, for instance, give her a set of values. And if she knows she's talking to an innocent, it's really easy to say, how does the fairy godmother promise transparency to an innocent client that cares a lot about transparency? Like, how do we message that? And now we're back to like kindergarten, just writing simple stories about those types of things. I mean, it really is that simple. It's so easy to overcomplicate. That's the most common thing, is that we just overdo it real bad.
And if your values say integrity, honesty, and communication, Let me tell you, you need to go back and
Right.
get a little more creative, right? It's
Yeah.
just like every corporate boardroom has those up on the wall.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
worst part is they don't say, what does integrity mean to us? Or whatever the other
Right.
cliches are. And if you know your brand persona, right, your archetype, you can speak to that in a way that resonates, because everybody says integrity, but isn't that the minimum requirement to be in business, right? Right. Come
Right.
on, that shouldn't be a value.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Enron was one of Enron's major values was integrity, right? You know.
Yeah, that got them, right? Yeah, totally.
You know.
Oh man.
So tell me this, as we're looking at the kind of, as we're thinking about our own brand archetype, like I think about mine for my values, and I mean, it's take care of the team first, and everything else will fall into place, and then figure out a way to create a lifestyle that works for you, and build a business around that, right? And so those kind of things. So if I guess I have two questions. Like if I'm to tell you this and dive a little bit deeper and obviously like talk more through that instead of just like two sentences, but if I were to tell you that and you were to be able to say, okay, so this is kind of where you probably fall, can you do that off of kind of limited information like that? And then which I'm guessing you can, because I mean you've been talking about different companies that I'm guessing you haven't been in the boardrooms for, or and can still kind of identify these things. But beyond that, can you tell me what types of archetypes I should be focusing on attracting to really implement this and bring in the kind of the greatest amount of interest and engagement in my brand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I would say, going off of like core values, it's a little bit harder because core values can be manipulated a little bit per the archetype, depending on where you fall. But it really does come down to what's most important to you. At the end of the day, if you have to strip everything away out of your business, what is still there? What is the most important thing? And like, that's really the question to answer. So if I asked you that, what would it, and especially as it pertains to how you're serving your clients, what's the most important thing to what you're doing?
The team, for
The
sure.
team.
Yeah, because talking about going back to Dean's point about what's not like taking a stand on something that's wrong in the industry. CRM companies don't serve their clients, right? So we have a team that actually does, right? And that's kind of what always sets us apart. So at the end of the day,
service. I think it's
right.
personal service for you guys.
Right.
That to me is what stands out for me.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's so I was just going to say that the team is really the kind of core, the core piece of that. Yeah.
Yep.
I would say, just based on that information only, that it's probably something like a ruler everyman archetype mix up. And so you have ruler, which stands to be the best, right? The ruler cares about being the best. So that can apply to customer service or how we serve our clients, how we treat our employees. It can just be that premise of structure that we're providing that allows us to be the best. And then I would throw in everyman because it's inclusive, and it is that like we care deeply about you. It doesn't feel like it's like super caregiver, because I don't think you're very like the business. It doesn't stand for like altruism or anything like that, but it is about being inclusive and taking care of people and having that kind of building those kinds of relationships. So just in a nutshell, I would say it's some sort of ruler everyman. And so when you think about that, as you're building your marketing strategy and talking to your employees, you want to think about how can we put quality cues in place in our process that prove to our clients that we are the best. And not just, I mean, you want to be the best, you have to walk the walk, but you also need to sort of talk the talk too. Sometimes you have to remind people that, who you are, and you want to just send out those things like, because we care so much about XYZ, we've gone ahead and done this thing for you extra. And so it's some of those things that you put into place into your process that elevate it, that not only are matching the walk you're walking, but really also showing that and making sure your consumers and your clients really understand that. Because as much as we'd like to believe that our clients really are like, they know everything about us and they know how deeply we care, at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, it's been good so far. Like that's kind of their sentiment sometimes. And so it's important that we do remind them, what we stand for. And so, and in terms of the everyman, that's probably looks like being very inclusive and using very inclusive language, and especially internally, making sure that everybody feels like they're a part of the team, and putting things into place to really support those initiatives. Like those are great starting points on how you can start working that into your brand and your messaging.
So it sounds like we're not just talking about finding new clients and acquiring new clients, but we're also talking about stickiness, right? We're talking about maintaining clients and keeping people with us for a lot longer than they would otherwise.
Yes. Well, I mean, they are the lowest cost acquisition to keep the clients we already have, and to,
Right.
to develop new things to help them and that make their lives easier as well. So I think that's, if it's not half the battle, it might be more, because it really is more cost effective to focus on clients we already have versus, picking up a bunch of new ones.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming you're attracting the clients that you want to keep.
Right.
Yeah,
Also important.
that's right.
Which goes back to that taking a stand and having a message and attracting that ideal client. And I think that there's a natural progression in the relationship with clients, but it takes us being proactive to move that forward. Otherwise, it's just like status quo. They continue on, everything's great. And sometimes they just sort of disappear and you don't even realize it over time. So how can you build, if there's a journey that we're all going on in life and in business, messaging to that, what is the next thing that you can do or support them with? I think it's important. And we forget that, right? We get them in the door, we're like, all right, let's do the work. And that's just really where the relationship begins.
It really is. I want to share a kind of an epiphany that I had at somewhere in the year, I think early last year, as we were just starting the process of data tracking with our clients and looking like, is there correlation here? Can we put this into some sort of graph and start to understand this data over time? And what we started realizing as a team is that some of our clients, no matter how great of work we were doing, if we weren't showing them how great of work we were doing sometimes, or if we weren't making sure to get that buy-in at very regular checkpoints, they didn't really care in so many ways about the actual work. And what we started to realize is that our clients that were a little bit different on the scale. So I'll give you the example here. So we're very risk tolerant. We take lots of risks in my company. We have no problem doing that. I would consider us to be masterful. We're really good at what we do. But we had some clients that were on the other side of the spectrum where they cared a lot more about stability. And when we started to put them all in this little area up here of stability, we started to realize they were all of the clients we were having problems with. And so as a team, we were like, this is fascinating. What is happening here? And we realized, like, just because we are risk tolerant doesn't mean they are. And so we were just like building it as we were flying it and not communicating well with the clients that needed the stability. And so no matter how great the work we were doing was, the logos and the websites and the strategy documents, it doesn't matter how good it is. If the process feels bad and they don't like it and they feel uncomfortable and they're white knuckling it the whole way through, they are not having a great customer experience. They aren't going to go out and rave to all of their friends and family and colleagues about working with us, even no matter how amazing the deliverables are. And that was really eye-opening to me. Is we were so focused, tunnel vision on the work, we couldn't see the big picture. And we do that for a living, and we were doing it. And so it's a really valuable message to companies everywhere to look at how this feels to your clients and look less at the work and more about the experience of working with you.
Yeah, you threw that word in right at the end, the experience. That was exactly where I was going to go. It's amazing. We're so focused, can be so focused on delivering the goods, whatever that may be, despite how we get that client to the end. And one of the, I see clients sometimes talking about, ROI, right? They sell ROI, whatever the heck that really means, right?
Right.
And they've never level set with the client how the client's going to measure ROI, first of all, and they don't have a mechanism to measure it, and they never communicate it. And so they may have got this really nice widget at the end, but the promise was never really fulfilled. And they leave them just sort of hanging. And so this sort of concept of lifetime client value and growing relationships becomes really difficult when you don't follow through intentionally, having a system to follow through to deliver that information at the right time.
Yeah. it is so important. It's more important than most people realize. Once we realized this and we grew a little bit more, I actually hired somebody into the company that is really kind of overseeing all operations.
Mhm.
And I would guess that she spends 80% of her time making sure clients, like, earning gold star moments for our clients. That's
Yeah.
the best way I can put it. And we actually have a roll of gold stars because that's a part of it internally. This particular person is very driven by gold stars, turns out. And so every time she goes above and beyond for a client, and I mean, because that's our promise, right? Is that we're going to do these things in a certain way. So you need something, we're going to respond right now. You aren't feeling good about something, we're going to take care of it right now. And we're going to always, and we always have these extra things above and beyond that should feel magical because we're a magician. And so we built all of this in, but that is almost her entire job, is just executing on that. And it's almost, I think it's more important than the work we're actually doing. It is amazing to even consider that, but I think it is.
Well, that's one way your brand archetype, right? In your case, the magician can deliver on a great experience, which leads to client stickiness.
Yes.
Right. I mean, connecting all of those dots. That's one of our little things in our invite for the session today was how can you use archetypes to increase stickiness. There you go. There's one. There's one way you can do it right away. But you probably haven't figured out your personality, your business's personality, right? So you can't deliver in a way that's consistent throughout the life cycle of the client.
Yeah, and that's really important. I mean, when we talk about building trust with clients, we have this very strange sixth sense. It's like I think it's our amphibian brain, right? That like just has this series of things that have happened and things we've seen and all this data we've gathered over our lives. And we instantly react to things. And so we see a color, we react. We see a word and we react. We see a message and we react. And so having those things, making sure that you're aware of those things is important, but it also is important on the other side when you're creating things and you are as a business that we remember that I'm trying to say this in not a really geeky way here.
Be geeky, it's good. We love it.
Yeah.
I know.
We can help translate if it's
okay, I think I got it. But if you aren't consistent, we start to actually, that little red flag goes up that's like, I don't trust this. And so the most silly things, like you changed fonts in between, like from one month to the next, and maybe you show up and you're like, we're bold and strong, but your colors are like light purple and yellow. Like those things actually create real legitimate mistrust for brands. And so it's something that we have to be aware of, is figure out who you are and then make sure everything you're doing supports it. Otherwise, those are little cues to consumers that are like, I don't know what it is. I just don't like this. It doesn't feel good to me. Something's off here. And it's those most subtle little things that do that.
Well, I mean, we can all see when someone's not aligned with what they're espousing, right? With what they're talking about. And so that's I mean, I can definitely see how that would be a huge thing just as a consumer. If you're just like, well, you're saying this, but you look like this, that's not, like, I'm not going to go up and tell someone I can wrestle Hulk Hogan when I haven't been to the gym in 6 months. Right. I mean, it's like, okay, sure, pal, go,
okay,
right. So, just to really bring the Gen X thing all the way around.
There we go.
So do you use archetypes as a way to disqualify prospects when you're determining whether or not to work with them? Like, are there some that you're just like, that's not going to happen?
I have a great, I can tell you a story about archetypes that blew my mind. We would never restrict on that. We have other criteria we do use that are based off of our archetypes. For instance, like we would never say like, oh, you're a sage, like, no way, we're not going to do that. But we do have other sets of qualifications using our archetypes. Being a magician, we care about big transformation. So if you walk in the door and you're like, we don't actually really want to change that much, we just need a refresh on our foundational things, or we're going through a merger, but we don't want to rock the boat too much. We just kind of want to stay status quo, stay the same as we are. We just need to update the logo. That's not really a good fit for us. We want massive transformation in our clients. And so they have to be looking for that. So we do use it, but just in a different way.
Gotcha.
It's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna tell you one client we had. I guess it's been a couple of years now. Was a tattoo shop that came in the door, and when we assessed them, the owner's goals were to be the best tattoo shop west of the Mississippi, and that's a bold claim. That's the kind of transformation we're looking at here, or talking about. But when we assessed the founder, he came in just completely unexpected. I don't remember what all of the archetypes were, but I know that we had a lot of like lover hero happening, but predominantly lover. And my whole team was scratching their head like, a lover tattoo shop? Like, I do not understand this. And we were like, we'll see, like maybe it's wrong, but it never has been. So we'll check it out. And it turns out that really, as it comes down to it, like it really just mattered a lot. The art that he was producing, the kind of shop he wanted to open was so different than most tattoo shops. And it was the fine line, very highly skilled tattoo work that it just blows your mind. It's amazing. The just, I don't know, perfection of the art. And that's where we started to pull in the sensual experience, right? Not to mention getting a tattoo is a pretty intimate experience. Like you're putting permanent art on my body. Like there's that. And so we were able to develop a brand for him where instead of it being like what you'd expect when you walk into a regular tattoo shop, it was all white and it looked like an art gallery. Like he has framed art on the walls and statues and all of these beautiful pieces around. You walk in the door and somebody offers you a Perrier and you're like, what is happening here? But it works for him because the majority of his clients are not repeat tattoo getters. There are people that are like, I lost a dog and I'm a 55-year-old woman and I've never had a tattoo in my life, but I want to memorialize my dog on my arm. And so they've never been to a tattoo shop. So it's very fitting and it works very well for the client experience when they walk in the door and they don't become terrified and run out the door afraid for their lives. Like that works really well with what he's doing. And so it's all of those pieces put together where it was like just perfection in the brand.
Yeah. And I would imagine with that persona, he can charge a premium too, right?
Yes,
it's not
absolutely.
the $50, 2 a.m. kind of deal where you just go to spin the wheel. I'll take that, right? That's not
right.
That's not the audience they're going after.
Right.
And along those lines, I was thinking about as you were describing that story, when we talk to prospects, pretty much everybody on the call today talks to a prospect from time to time, hopefully, right? And we all kind of have to write proposals and we have to sort of try and differentiate. So if we've done a good job with our marketing and our messaging and our lead gen, and we've brought somebody in to have a conversation, it would not that we're all going to be experts at brand archetype tomorrow, but
right.
to just sort of have those things framed up in your mind when you deliver your proposal, when you write your proposal, right? What they want and the experience and the journey that you're going to take them through, use the brand archetype that you believe that prospect is, and it will relate to them more than just throwing the same old template down and trying to say the same thing to everybody all the time. To me, it's like we're qualifying, but we're going beyond that, right? We're trying to create this profile in our mind of who this ideal client is and how they'll react to the story. I was working with a prospect the other day, and we started this conversation about social media, and I realized they needed some guidance. They needed a vision for the future. They weren't looking for tactical help. So we completely switched the conversation, and I started talking about this kind of concept of vision and future. And it just clicked with them but that's not where we began. So being really sort of empathetic, maybe, is another way to put it, of the audience.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And I think when you generally understand your clients or your potential clients' pain points, which, and I know you and I have talked a lot about this, Dean, is going through a real buyer journey. And I know you do that work. And it's really important to know what the real pains that your buyers are experiencing from, there's a lot of products and brands and services that feel like they solve this big problem or this big need, right? Like, I don't have a car and I need one. Like, those are big problems, but like down to the most finite detail, like our clients want to be able to express themselves when they're ordering coffee. What? But no, that's the level I'm talking about. We've got to get to here is what, like, not just like, who are they and how old are they and how much money do they make and how many kids do they have, but really like, what pain have they experienced? What have been their bad experiences thus far? What is their psychological state as they're walking into this process? And how do we best speak to that? And so if you can get to a place where you just understand even a top 3 things that are happening for them, to be able to empathize and draw out that pain a little bit more, helps you understand how you can better solve it for them.
Yeah. I've got to throw it up. I saw a meme the other day and I just pulled it up on my screen. I'm going to read it to you. This is how the typical like buyer persona, age and gender and all that stuff doesn't work. So I'm going to read these things out. So a male born in 1948, raised in the UK. It's not me. I'm not that old. Is married twice. Only been married once. Lives in a castle and is wealthy and famous. Okay. So that's like, if you think about age, gender, income, that's kind of the old school buyer persona, right?
Right.
So who comes to mind? Anybody in particular? It's a famous English person.
Like Henry VIII is
right.
Yeah,
totally, right? Yeah. So I wish I could share my screen. I'm not going to do that. So it's actually 2 people. It's Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne. Couldn't be any more different, right? Any more different in who they are, what they probably need, how they see the world, or their experience. But you take the old standard sort of demographic stuff for a buyer profile, it doesn't work anymore. Just doesn't.
Right.
So anyway, I just had to share that with you. I think it was funny.
That's
Prince Charles
funny.
and Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that because that's very typical. And you hear a lot of people saying like, oh, buyer avatars and archetypes are old, but not if you use them right. Like we have to take it one step further here and understand people at a different level than that.
Yeah. I love it.
So I'm curious, I'm thinking through to this, as you were kind of discussing some of the points that you were making here about talking about how we can use this to sell more and whatnot, particularly with Dean's question about creating proposals and things like that. I'm wondering if there's a way that, I don't know if there's a tool like this or anything already, but if there's a way that we can add some very kind of key questions, some key questions into our, because we all go through our kind of initial, so tell me about your business, tell me about what you're doing, tell me about the things, like how many employees you have, or like all the kind of that initial checklist of questions that we go through, whether it's, I know some people that literally write them out and some people that just have them in their head. If there's some key questions that they can ask inside of that kind of initial conversation, initial interview, if you will, that will help them identify who they are in this kind of archetype wheel and how they can, and then be able to determine based on that how they can best connect with them on this kind of deep level.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that can be asked. We developed an archetype assessment a while back, about a year ago, that's very proprietary to our use, but it is asking questions. You're looking at the two main access points, right? So on one side, you have connection and belonging, and on the other side, freedom and independence. So questions that gauge where they fall on that scale can be very useful, as well as stability and control versus mastery and risk. How willing are you to take risks? How much do you like stability? And assessing those things, that gives you a really good starting point for just like those inner desires that I guarantee most people are not asking them. And it forces them to think about it too. And then beyond that, just really understanding like how they best serve their clients. Like, we're doing great work if we blank. If we provide liberation to our clients, if we make sure they feel included, if we are the best, if we're transforming their lives. And so you're just looking, those are all based on specific archetypes, but just taking it to a more psychological level and not just thinking about like, do you need a logo or a website? But like, for us, we ask questions like, how important to you is this, this transformational growth? Like, how long do you want this growth period to take? Like, what's your vision for that? What's your 10-year vision? Because those are all things talking about transformation. And so we don't really actually even care a whole lot about the details of the answer, more than we're just looking to understand who they are as a person, so that when we do talk to them, we know kind of where they fall on some of those scales and what they need to hear. And sometimes that doesn't mean that we keep changing to be somebody we're not, but we can also assess quicker if we're a good fit for them or if we're not. So, when we get clients that are like, I have this massive vision and I want this huge transformation and this rebrand. And we have this huge vision to be the best tattoo shop in the west of the Mississippi in 5 years. Like, those are things that key me up to be able to say, like, we are a perfect fit for you. We have to work together because that's exactly what we do. That's what we provide to our clients, instead of not knowing that coming in. So it just helps us to tailor that a little bit more. And again, it doesn't need to be complicated. These are basic, just desires and needs that people have as a human.
Yeah.
I guess, it's a good point, because I mean, realistically, we all know how we can take more risks with whatever we're selling, right? I mean, versus stay more secure. So I mean, I would imagine that we can curate a question to be able to get there. So like, are you you growing a sales team real fast? Or are you trying to develop bring one person on at a time? Kind of gives you a sense of where they stand on that kind of a thing. And so that's interesting, but I feel like that's a very real way to use that and make a big impact. That, to your point, people aren't doing that. People aren't asking those questions.
No. And
Right.
that in itself is a way to stand out. Like, if you're looking for differentiators, those questions and caring that much about how they feel and what their experience has been and what they're looking for, no matter if you're a good fit or not, it does prove to them that you care more than just about selling your product or your service, that you really are trying to make sure you are a good fit and understand them at a deeper level than most people are giving them time for, which just that right there can be really cool and a neat experience for those people.
Yeah, just even just simply asking, what is that going to do for you? They want to do this thing, whatever they said, right? They want to solve this problem in their business. Just simply asking, why? What is that going to do? What are you hoping? And then ask that question 3 or 4 times and keep digging, because they may eventually say, so we're financially stable and we can take care of our clients and my family.
Right. Yeah.
That's why they want to do it. That's really different to, we want to conquer the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you have to channel your inner, like, what age is that? Is that like 4, where you're just like, but why?
But why?
But why?
Well,
But
I've got a 2-year-old, and that's all I'm hearing right now. So why?
I know, and you're like trying to explain it, but like, stop asking that. But then also, like, I appreciate your inquisitive nature, but also please quit asking me why.
Because I said so, right?
Yeah. But at some point you just don't know anymore. Right? Because that's how it was taught to me, right? It's like that,
right.
The story about the family and the ham, where they cut off the last quarter of the ham every time, right? And it's because everybody did it before then, but nobody knows why, right? So no.
Yeah, all of a sudden you get into a weird place, like, well, because my childhood isn't going to be as good as yours, and we need you to have a better life. And you're like, wow, I'm talking to a 3-year-old. What is happening here?
Yeah, exactly right.
Just completely fall apart there.
That's right. All right, so we're here we got a couple more minutes. So Wes asked a question: is there a way that we can get a copy of the archetypes?
Yes. We can definitely, I can send you guys some resources for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you have a place we could like link them here so that people do have access to them. But yeah, I have access to, I have a couple of different things, but one of the coolest things we have is a full page information sheet about each of the 12 archetypes that just gives you just kind of an overview to start getting your bearings around who you might be.
Yeah. Do you have that on a landing page somewhere that people can go to and download?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so if you send me a link to that landing page, then I will include it in the recap email that goes out tomorrow to everybody that joined here today, so that they can see it, and we'll link to it on Facebook, in the Facebook thing, and on YouTube when it goes up there too.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I'll send it to you.
Absolutely, that's perfect. Thank you.
Of course.
So the last question that I like to ask, if there's one thing for people to take away from today's conversation, Stephanie, what would that one thing be?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would say really the one thing that's most important here is to just understand that you need to have a separate identity and personality and voice and tone and just character in your business that is one character. It's not like the founder's one and the manager's another and this person's this person. You need one identity for your brand that it might be very similar to who you are as a human, but you need to have it and it needs to be separate away from who you are as a person, because that will make your life a million times easier, guaranteed.
Nice. Dean, what would you recommend people take away with?
We've touched on this a little bit, but once you've started to figure out that brand identity, that archetype, find a way to weave empathy into your messaging. Empathy, sit in the chair of your ideal prospect and message from their perspective using the story and the tone of your brand archetype.
Yeah,
awesome.
Great.
I think my biggest takeaway is once you figure out who you are, own it.
Own it.
And then
Yeah.
to work it, just be yourself. Be, what was it? A friend of mine once said, be fearlessly authentic.
Yeah.
So once
sage advice.
right? So once you find that brand, stick with it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, Dean, thank you so much. This was a really cool conversation. I enjoyed it. I hope that all of our attendees enjoyed it as well. Again, Stephanie is going to send me that link, and so I will include it in the email that goes out tomorrow. And it'll also be up on YouTube and on Facebook. And with that, we will see you next time around. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.